Well, it's about time. We're going to start at the 11:30 of the hour of East Coast time. I want to welcome everybody to our webinar for Open-E DSS V7 maintenance mode with failover. This is a new feature that was recently introduced on our latest release. So it's gained a lot of attention because with maintenance mode in failover for iSCSI and NFS shares, we can actually do a lot of things while the virtual IP addresses are still available, but the cluster service is shut down. So it's something that's we've been wanting to put out into DSS as a feature. So what I'm going to talk about is how to enable maintenance mode. And then what we're going to do is move the resources on the node that we are going to decommission. Maybe you want to change the NIC. Maybe you want to have a new RAID array or a whole new system and upgrade. With that, what we're going to do is stop the failover and keep the virtual IP addresses running. So I'll show you how that process is done. And then we'll go ahead and shut the other node that we really want to decommission, maybe redo the volume, new NICs, and then introduce the new node. Once we get the new node up, then we'll configure the new node with the logical volumes, the replication, the share, and the targets. And then we're going to configure the failover auxiliary port IP addresses, the ping nodes, the virtual IP addresses, and the resources. And then we'll start the failover service and be able to continue the service. So let me show you what I have running right now. Just to do it quickly, I have 3 virtual machines, DSS A, B, and C right here. In these virtual machines, I got them configured where right now A and B is being replicated. Then C is going to be my new virtual machine I'm introducing. So let's go to the DSSs that I have here. So this is DSS-A as my virtual machine, DSS-B, and DSS-C will be the new machine I'm going to be introducing. Again, I'm doing this as probably the most drastic way to be able to show you about the maintenance mode, because maybe B, you just want to change the NIC, or you want to do something else. But this gives you a wide range of an idea of what you can do with maintenance mode. In the failover, if you look in my failover manager, the cluster is running, both nodes on A and B. I'm replicating in an active-active environment. So there are some volumes on DSS-A that are in source mode and one on B that's in source mode. If you notice, maintenance mode right here, okay, is off, and that's off by default. So how do I enable that? How do I turn it on? Very simply, you can go to the console screen, either walk up keyboard, monitor, or if you have an SSH connection, enable PuTTY, and be able to PuTTY right into it to get into the console screen. So I'm going to do a Control-Alt-X, which is my extended tools. And down here on the bottom, you're going to see cluster maintenance mode. So let's go ahead and enter. And I'm going to use my arrow up key and then spacebar and then hit apply. Now cluster mode maintenance is enabled. All right, let's shrink this down. And instantly you'll see that the maintenance mode is turned on now. So now that this is enabled, it also enables it for the other node. So let's take a look. By the way, the latest version that I am using that does have the maintenance mode is going to be up 56, so build 19059. So let's take a look on the other failover. It's running, and of course it sends the message on to the other system that the maintenance mode is on. Again, this is my other node C. There is nothing on there. I just sped things up here, just put the volumes on, but there is no cluster setup. So DSS-C is what we're going to introduce, and DSS-B is what we're going to decommission. If we scroll down, I have my resources onto this local node. So here you'll see my iSCSI volume, my NFS share that's on here, and of course on my other node, node B, you'll see that I have no NFS and I just have the iSCSI. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this from node B over to node A and move its resources over. So we're going to give that a second. So right now it's moving all the volume information, the metadata, everything now is being noted that this is now the source volume. And if we look on node B, and we go to configuration, volume replication, and right now it's just cycling through, you'll see now that this volume, which was source, is now put into a destination mode. And the DSS V7 will show that its resources from node B are now on its local node on DSSA. So here we have now moved the resources from B to A, and we're ready to decommission the DSSB. Okay, now before I do that, this is very critical. So this is where the maintenance mode comes into play. So if I click on stop, I have three options: cancel, stop and enable virtual IP addresses, and stop and disable virtual IP addresses. Well, obviously in this case, since I'm decommissioning B, or I want to make changes to B for its NIC or its hardware, I want to stop and enable the virtual IP addresses. And then it's going to go through some checks, and it's going to inform B. It's also going to start using the virtual IP addresses, stop the clustering. So there's a lot of activity going on in here. While it's stopping, let's take a look at VMware. So here we have on the targets that were created, NFS and iSCSI. Those were the two resources that we have. And the data in there is still accessible. So this shows that the maintenance mode is now working, and the virtual IP address is still connected, because my virtual IP address for the NFS share on my resources for A is on the last third octet, 21.10, and of course my iSCSI is on 21.10. It could be on 22. All my virtual IP addresses will still be displayed here, so I'm still connected. Now you'll see the state that it's ready to start, but yet your virtual IP addresses are still running. If we scroll down, everything's intact. Now, until we decommission B, you'll see things different. So let's go to B, and we see it's 32, and I'm going to do something very drastic here. So let's do extended tools, and let's go ahead and destroy and delete the volume group. So right down here, obviously you don't want to do this with the active data that you need. So I'm going to select it. And that means while this is running, DSSB, that volume group is totally being deleted. And so you're going to see some slow times, you're going to see some activity here. It's going, and now it's going to want to shut down. Give it a second. And we will go ahead and just reboot it and shut it down. So at which point now we're ready to introduce C. This is our new node. Right now, C, I've already, just to speed up time, I've already created a volume group. Already created the iSCSI and NAS volumes, but I did not put the replication on the NAS volume for a reason, and I'll go into that in a minute. But let's go take a look back on A. On A, what we want to do is you're going to start seeing some messages come up, as you already see in the pop-up screens. You're going to see a lot of red notation. Things are not synced. What we want to do right now is you want to go into your volume replication. So configuration, volume manager, then select volume replication. And what we want to do is disconnect. So we want to start that right now. Now his job is to maintain host binding. So he's going to try to give it every chance, maybe a little bit more, to see if he can still reconnect to that IP of the other node B that we have. So in some cases, it may take 2 times to be able to get it disconnected, but it'll sooner or later disconnect. And at the same time, let's go ahead with node C, and there we go, we are disconnected. Now let's go back to C. In C, when I created the volume, so you want to make sure they're the same size. If they're not, you will not be able to replicate. And if you're not sure, always go back to your existing node, and you can go into your volume group and then match the same sizes for your volume. So I know I have an iSCSI volume here with 4 gig. I have a NAS with 3.75 gig, and of course another iSCSI with 5 gig. The reason why I made them small, because I need to replicate these. And if they were larger, we would have a longer webinar. So let's go back to see. Here I've already set that replication. It's very simple, by the way. When you do create a new volume, you select iSCSI volume and you select use volume replication. And then of course set the exact same size. With the NAS, you don't want to do that. You don't want to use volume replication yet. What you want to do is create the NAS volume first, then go to your configuration, go to NAS settings, make sure NFS is enabled, then go back to configuration, go to NAS resources to the shares, and create the share name. Here I have data. Again, if you forget, you can go back to your existing node, node A, and go to shares, and you see I have the same share name, data. And another note is that the SMB must be turned off, Apple Talk, FTP, all other file protocols must be turned off when you're using NFS failover. Here I see that synchronous mode is enabled, so I want to also do that on C as well to make sure that it has the same settings. So SMB is turned off, all other protocols are turned off, and I select NFS, make sure that synchronous mode is on. So I'm good. Once you've done that, then you go back into configuration, into your volume groups, go back to that NAS share, and enable your replication. So all you have to do is look at the volume, the logical volume number. Here it's LV001, and I'm going to modify that. Now I add volume replication, and the task will be now noted that with a check mark to have the replication enabled. Another note, if you do want to use Sambas and SIFs, or you do want to use Apple Talk Filing Protocol or others, create another NAS logical volume. Otherwise, once a NAS logical volume has replication enabled for NFS, you will not be able to use it only just for that. So keep that in mind. Just add another NAS logical volume. Storage is cheap, right? Okay. Now by default, it's going to set all these in replication to source mode. So here what we want to do is change these to source mode and clear the metadata. So now they're in destination. Let's go back to A now. In A, we're ready to configure the host binding. So we're going to go into the volume replication. Here I'm going to need the remote IP address. Now on C, I'm going to set that to 2.33. So just to verify, you go to my network interfaces, and I'm going to use E2 2.33 as my host binding. And of course my GUI password should be the same. And now we're going to connect. Here we also want to clear the metadata for the source volumes, or you will have issues because you want to have clear metadata sending them back over to the new node. So now you see it's reachable. Now we can go ahead and clear the metadata. And if you notice on node C, go back into our volume replication, it will also state that the host binding is now reachable. So it's already communicating. Now we can go ahead and create a replication task. Here we'll start off with the volume replication. That's for the iSCSI that I first created. You notice it picked up the destination volume rapidly because it matched the same size. So a 4 gigabyte is going to replicate to a 4 gigabyte. It's not going to replicate to a 4 to a 5 gigabyte. So let's go ahead and start this task. And of course we're getting messages that it's connecting and it's starting its replication task between the two, and start checking and replicating synchronously block by block. While it's doing that, let's go ahead and set up our NFS. You see it picked up on LV001 and it found it on the other side. And it's sending us messages, as you can see up here, that the replication, the connection is enabled for that first LV00 that we have, and it's going into the replication state. And let's turn on the task for NFS. And while it's doing that, let's go ahead and create our VREP2. And again, it picks up the other side destination volume for its replication. Let's give this a second, and then we'll be able to start the other replication task for the iSCSI. Now, before you start proceeding, you really want to check to see what the status is of your tasks. You want to make sure that they're consistent. So what we'll do is, even that's running down there, we can go ahead and go to status task. And these, you can see, I've already started. So let's look at the first one. So right now we have 2 seconds left to finish the replication before it becomes consistent. That's why we wanted to set this webinar to be a smaller size volume, because you can imagine if you have 16 terabytes, we would be here all day. Well, actually not, but I mean on a 10 gig that would fly pretty quick. Up to possibly 4 hours you'd be finished. If we look at the NFS, we'll see here it's almost 48 seconds. So let's let that cook in the oven and let's go ahead to the next stage. One of the first things you want to do is the NAS shares, we don't have to do anything. It's already done, but we do want to match the iSCSI targets and the iSCSI target SCSI IDs to the same. So let's go to target 0. So here we have the LV0 4 gig. That's our SCSI ID. What we need to do is copy our target name. There we go. And go to DSSC, and let's go to configuration, iSCSI targets, and we'll take off the default name, because you want to have matching target names. If not, the failover service will not turn on, and it will send you a message as to why. So it can point you into the direction of what you need to modify, change, or fix. So here I have my iSCSI volumes that I want to use, LV00. Obviously I want to match the same one. I want to keep the same SCSI ID. So what we'll do is we'll just copy it from here and then bring it over to here into the first LV00, paste that, and of course attach it to this target. And let's go ahead and do for the second target. So let's go back on DSSA, and let's copy our target name. And it's important to really know your target names, because it defines where the target actually resided on in the beginning. So it's kind of almost like good data management or administration. So here we'll take off the default, add in the target name, go back and get the SCSI ID for target 1. And then of course, let's paste that into the new target. Alright, we're attached. By the way, just let's take a look. Is VMware still connected? It still is. So here you can see let's do a refresh. Our data is there. And of course, even on iSCSI, we can browse our data, it's still there. Okay, let's go back to DSS. So once you've configured your targets to be the same for your SCSI IDs and your target names, now we're ready to start the failover service. We're going to go ready to set up failover. Here it's in a blank state because we need to configure some things. So one of the first things we want to do is get into our auxiliary paths. Now by default it's going to use obviously the volume replication NICs. And what we're going to add is, we'll just add the GUI NICs because there's less traffic on that. So we'll select ETH 1. And I like to have at least 2 or 3 auxiliary paths, but 2 is enough. And then of course we're in the ping nodes. Ping nodes are part of the pseudo cluster. I like to have 2 to 3 at the most. In this case, let's just do 2. So I like to use either a firewall, a switch, a hypervisor of some sort, something that's going to have a long uptime. So let's add our new ping node. And it sees it. Let's add another one. So I'm going to connect to my switch because I know my switch has a UPS on it. So there's a lot of uptime. So you really don't want to use, let's say, a printer or a desktop, something that might shut down. Okay, I'm going to leave the defaults here because this is for another topic, but if you ever and if you're inquisitive about what these settings are and these advanced settings, you can always click on the question mark and it'll bring up information and details for these settings so you have a greater understanding. But typically the defaults are good as they are, so you don't really need to set anything. Let's first talk about the virtual IP addresses. Right now I'm resetting the virtual IP addresses, so I want to keep them the same. So for my ESX that is connected to this, it's connected to 21.10, and I'm using ETH0 to ETH0. And make this a class C. So again, VMware right now is still connected to the virtual IP address. Even though we're resetting it in there, it's resetting just the clusters. So we keep that virtual IP address alive. That's why ESX is still seeing the data and it's still seeing the virtual IP address. So kind of think of it's on pause. In this one for the other node, we're going to make it 22.10, which it was before. And we're going to select E0 to E0 for each of the nodes. So local node and remote. In a lot of cases, you probably, if you're using iSCSI, you want to use multipathing. So you would have multiple entries of the virtual IP addresses. So you would have 2 virtual IP addresses for each node. That will enable you to have multiple paths. So you also have path failover as well. So you would have 2 virtual IP addresses. So let's say ETH1 would be used, or ETH4, 3, and also conversely also on the other node. Okay, so now we're ready to add our resources. We're first going to go to our iSCSI, and we're going to add 0. And again, if you're in an active passive, this will work as well. Currently I'm in an active, and you can switch things around by stopping the cluster again. So right now we're just showing this as a quick review of how to get it in and out of the maintenance mode. So you can see on top it says the targets have been removed or added successfully. Let's go to our NFS and we'll add our NFS share. And let's go take a look at our status to make sure everything is completed. So we see that the NFS is consistent, the first iSCSI volume is consistent, and we see that the other iSCSI volume is consistent. So they're all consistent. And we'll go add our other one. Additionally, I wanted to show you that when you make changes here, it also replicates the information over to the other node. So let's go to a DSSC and take a look. Here you can see all the information was also transferred over to C. You can see that the network statuses are reachable. It sent the information to the auxiliary paths, and the ping nodes are reachable. It sees all the virtual IP addresses that we've added in. If you notice, this is the local node, right? and then this is the remote node. Okay, let's go back to A. And everything's synced and it has been added successfully. So let's scroll up to the top and let's start. Now this takes a little bit of time because even though it's checking everything, it's validating and making sure that the metadata is good, that the NICs and the MAC addresses are good, and then it'll start over. Now, let's take a look again on the ESX server. We're still able to browse our data, and the virtual IP addresses that we still have are in there. It's still connected because in my storage adapters, if we look, and if we go to properties, let's bring this up a little bit. So here we could see all the paths. So you here see the 22.10 is my virtual IP address, and you can have 21.10, which is my other, and that's for my target that we're using. So you will be able to see that storage in here, which we do. Alright, let's go back to DSS. Okay, it's sending messages. And now it's running okay. So, that's maintenance mode. And that's how it works. And that's how slick it can be. It's a nice feature to be able to do a hot add-on. Let's look at DSSC. It's stating it's okay. So now you're able to move resources over back into the original position, or however you want. You could stop the cluster again, and you can reconfigure and just make sure that the status is enabled. So here I'm stopping the cluster again, and my virtual IP addresses are still connected, and then thus you can make changes. Just remember to enable maintenance mode to the on position and you'll be fine. So with that, everybody, if you have any questions, please email us at either info@open-e.com or just send us a regular message. We're also on the online chat, so if you have questions, get on our online website and we'll prompt you up with a chat, and please ask us questions. There are some engineers available. If you have any questions about a function, feature, or if you have a pre-sales question, you can always email us at pre-sales@open-e.com. Remember, there are other webinars that we have for the up and coming events in months to time, and they're also on our website, YouTube, and Vimeo. Take care, everyone. See you next time.